Hi, welcome back to another Stand on Guard episode. I'm David Krayden, broadcasting to you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. So many things going on, even though our House of Commons isn't sitting. And when I come back, just a few words about what we're doing here and what we're going to be talking about today. Back in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please subscribe. Please don't unsubscribe. We've been losing subscribers. Not too many, but appreciate your support in any way you can offer it. Resubscribe if you must. YouTube has been taking a lot of folks off the subscription rolls. And please share this broadcast with your friends and family. It's so important because it's like we're being suppressed to the point where people can't not see it outside the regular stream of listeners. So that's what we're fighting. It's a huge fight. And I just want to say at the beginning here, what is this show about? Well, there are times you'll watch what we present here and what I say here, and it might make you uncomfortable. But this is about freedom of speech, and I try to relay a variety of opinions on here. And I let it be known which ones I agree with and which ones I don't, but that's up to you. But right now, we are facing a world crisis, and I think we should have the freedom to discuss it in an open fashion and not be held captive by preconceptions or because Donald Trump or somebody else says it has to be this way. Never invest that kind of trust in any politician, in any leader. You'll make a megalomaniac out of him or her. And that's why we always have to be skeptical of politicians, of the mainstream media, of the bureaucracy, of the system. Because if we're not, we become perhaps unwitting, but we become fools. And this is why I will say things on this broadcast that might offend you from time to time, but that's fine. And I think I've said lots of things in this broadcast that have encouraged you and exhorted you, and that's what I continue to try to do. The last thing I'll ever be is in the pocket of any politician or any political movement to the point where I'm afraid to criticize, to the point where I'm afraid to question. That's what this show has always been about. Never being in the pocket of anybody, whether it's in Canada or the US or the world. And that's what I strive to do. And I think the majority of you who watch this show every day would agree. And if I'm wrong about something, I'll admit it. Like I said, I was wrong about Iraq 25 years ago. And the same arguments that are being used right now over Iran were the same arguments used to invade Iraq. And I think we need to at least question whether or not this is going to a good place or not. I'm going to start with a funny little anecdote here. This kills me because every time the heat goes up a bit in this modern world, and of course, it's all a direct result of climate change. Yeah, it gets a little hot, gets a little humid. Well, it's no different than I remember how hot and humid it was when I lived in Ottawa briefly as a boy before we moved out to British Columbia. And it was hot and humid in those days. I was on the golf course yesterday. It was so hot and humid, I was able to do that. I didn't pass out. But they're closing the pools, and I couldn't believe this. They're closing the pools because it's so hot and humid. Doesn't it make sense to keep the pools open when it's hot and humid? Think about it. No, but people don't think about things anymore, do they? But to a large degree, they don't, unfortunately. I want to share this with you, too, because as far as I'm concerned, this is the sleeper story of the month. Because nobody's questioning The mainstream media. Nobody in the mainstream media is questioning, why does Mark Carney want to sign a defense pact with the European Union? Now, I mean, think about this on two levels. We are not part of Europe. We should not be spending money for Europe's defense. We should not be part of this Rearm Europe initiative, which is costing $225 billion. That's the total cost. I mistakenly have said in the past, Mark Carney wants to foot the whole bill, but he wants to foot a portion of that bill. God knows it could be a substantial amount. However, Canada is already a founding member of NATO, and that organization will probably teeter on for a little longer. And the object of NATO, of course, was collective security with a focus on protecting Western Europe from Soviet aggression in the East. That was the whole raison d'etre of NATO. So why do we have another NATO propping up that's going to cost more money, that's going to replicate the services and the military force of NATO? It's insane. But that's what Mark Carney wants to do, because this is all about posturing and saying, hey, Canada is really, really not dependent upon the United States. Canada is more aligned with Europe than it is the United States. But of course, on Wednesday, when Donald Trump's in town, Mark Carney is almost on his knees worshiping Donald Trump, saying, "What you're the most transformational leader in the world." So this is all theater of the absurd. And and I keep saying that because it is. It is so incredibly absurd what Mark Carney thinks Canadians are going to believe and what they're going to get away with, and what he thinks he can get away with. Oh, time for a cup of coffee. Yeah. Anyway, we will be talking a bit about the international crisis, but here's Mark Carney and his good wife. Aircraft in Brussels for the EU Canada summit. This is where Mark Carney signs away Canada, sells out Canada to the European Union. And there's, of course, everybody waiting for him. Can't wait to see Mark Carney. Oh dear. But no, this is where we're at, folks. And I just find it incredible. Yeah, I'm just making sure I got a video downloaded here. I didn't do that properly. All right, so Mark Carney is selling out to Europe. And of course, that's going to mean more billions of dollars are going to go to Ukraine, which is technically a European state, wants to be a member of the European Union as well as NATO. Oblivious to the fact that that's what the whole war in Ukraine with Russia is all about. NATO membership. NATO has done everything possible to escalate the conflict there. Another war we have to get over. We have to get over. Remember Donald Trump saying he would solve that in 24 hours? Yeah. Well, apparently that hasn't happened either. And this is what really worries me. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, Donald J. Trump wrote yesterday on his Truth Social account. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? So he's MAGA. So he's once again upping the ante. Is this wise? Okay, so you might agree that it was a good thing to take out Iran's nuclear power stations because potentially they could have been used to create nuclear weapons or a nuclear bomb. Is it a good idea to ask now for a regime change to escalate this? Because you're not going to get a regime change by dropping a few more bombs from B-2 bombers. You're going to have to put troops on the ground, take over the capital, and install a new government. Oh, what can go wrong? Well, what went wrong in Iraq? You remember when George W. Bush came back, landing on an aircraft carrier? He vaults out of the F-18, takes his helmet off, gets glad handing the sailors on board the aircraft carrier, and he announces that the war's over in Iraq. It's all over. Turned out he was a little bit premature. And it went on and on and on. And the casualties mounted and mounted and mounted. The fatalities mounted and mounted and mounted. And it was ultimately, and still is, a disaster. Iraq is a basket case of a country totally destabilized. And you think it might happen in Iran too, if we insist upon changing the government to something the United States wants? This is why I'm saying I supported Donald Trump, because he wanted an end to foreign wars and to stop U.S. intervention at every possible opportunity. That's not happening in this case, and I'm encouraging Donald Trump to get back to get back to the program, because that's what we need to do. Now, this amazed me. I don't know if this person's ever spent 5 seconds in uniform, or if she has any comprehension about war is. Well, war is when two nations collide and they start firing at each other. They start firing missiles, or they start shooting at each other, or dropping bombs. So Trump, no, she's right. Diane, you're right. Trump didn't declare war. He just started one without declaring war. That's called a surprise attack. Yeah. The president has authority to conduct military action as commander-in-chief. This is not just military action. And somehow she conflates this to Obama. Of course, Obama started wars too, without congressional approval, without congressional authority. Yes, of course, Obama did that. Does that mean that this is not a war? And I love what Thomas Massie had to say about this yesterday. Thomas Massie, of course, the Republican representative from Kentucky, the only Republican who stood up and said Donald Trump can't go to war with Iran without seeking and obtaining congressional approval. Let's listen to the very sagacious Thomas Massie.
That this isn't an act of war, I find ludicrous. This is a hot war. There are two nations, Israel and Iran, trading volleys of missiles every night, every day, and we're co-belligerent now in this war.
I mean, the vice president went on to say that they needed to act now because there was a narrow window, and if they waited, it could have been too late. And they needed to stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Do you not share that concern?
No, I don't share that concern. But I have another concern, and that is that 3 bombings to neutralize Iran may turn out to be the 2025 version of 2 weeks to slow the spread. This could turn into a protracted, prolonged engagement, and I'm here to represent the base of the MAGA party that got Trump elected. Most of us were tired of the wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and we were promised that we wouldn't be engaging in another one. Yet here we see this happening, and there's the president and the administration say, "Oh, we're done. We've had our little bombing, and now this is over." But what happens if this drags on between Israel and Tel Aviv gets pummeled by Iran? Is President Trump going to say we're going to sit by and not do anything in that instance? I'm leery of this given everything that's happened before.
I have to laugh because this CNN guy, this is State of the Union, right? It's CNN Sunday news program. He says, "Aren't you worried about weapons of mass destruction?" Oh my goodness. Do you remember hearing about that? Saddam Hussein allegedly had stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell, then Secretary of State, went to the United Nations, showed a bunch of grainy black and white photographs and said, "See that pile of crap over there? Those are weapons of mass destruction. Take my word for it." People squinting and thinking, "I can't really see anything there, Colin. Take my word for it. Those are weapons of mass destruction." Turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction. And we bombed the hell out of Iraq, killed hundreds of thousands of civilians in the process, and there were no weapons of mass destruction. Now, of course, the WMD grants with them. When we got to bomb the hell out of Iran, we're going to start with the nuclear sites, then they'll get to the cities. And That's when things start getting really nasty. Now, you remember what Tulsi Gabbard
The
said?
IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
Now, of course, she said, oh, people took my words out of context. And Donald Trump was very upset with her. Donald Trump was extremely upset with Tulsi Gabbard because she was off message. She wasn't reading the right talking points. But Donald Trump is still not very happy with Tulsi Gabbard, even though Tulsi Gabbard has said, hey, you took me out of context. I really didn't mean that. And we have new intelligence from Mossad, actually. New intelligence proves that Iran's definitely days, weeks, and months away from producing a nuclear weapon. So Donald Trump is still not very happy with Tulsi.
So you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon. Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
So I thought the director of national intelligence was the one that was supposed to be informing Donald Trump about intelligence matters. And Donald Trump is not the one who's supposed to be knowing the intelligence. He's supposed to use the people he appoints to those positions to provide that information to him. But when the information is not what he wants to hear, then they're wrong. They're wrong. That's a very, very dangerous reaction to all of this. And so what about this intelligence? Well, there's increasing reports suggesting that the intelligence is not just perhaps a little bit biased from Israel, but it might be predicated on artificial intelligence, on what artificial intelligence is expecting to find, not what they have found. And here, the AI that triggered the war, how Palantir, I always get that. Palantir and the IAEA fueled Israel's strike on Iran. So this is predictive. And we've got a Palantir guy here. Palantir, there I go. I do it every time. Explaining. And this guy, this is what kills me. This guy would have been described as a woke liberal. But now that Donald Trump's in power, well, he's on Donald Trump's side. He's on MAGA's side now. And it's incredible. But here he is describing how artificial intelligence knows better than anybody. And do you really want to entrust intelligence gathering, and by extension, whether we go to war or not, on artificial intelligence? I don't.
Americans are the most loving, God-fearing, fair, least discriminatory people on the planet. And they want to know that if you're waking up and thinking about harming American citizens, or if American citizens are taken hostage and kept in dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved. And, you know, when Americans are spending $1 trillion on defense, what I want and what I think my peers want is, why are these people keeping our citizens hostage, torturing our people, attacking our allies, maligning us in what was once called the United Nations, basically a discriminatory institution against anything good? We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared. And that's why this conference is so important, because we have the best products in the world, and we cannot have parity. Our adversaries do not have our moral compunction. If it's even, they will take advantage of our niceness, kindness, our desire to be at home in Nebraska or New Hampshire or wherever we live in our peaceful environments. And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. And if you give that to the American people will go back and say, and honestly, probably shouldn't say this is why I thought the Democrats were going to lose the election, why they did, because people want to live in peace. They want to go home. They do not want to hear your woke pagan ideology. They want to know they're safe. And safe means that the other person is scared. That's how you make someone safe. And the average American person understands this. Unfortunately, many of the intellectually captured institutions funneled and intellectually owned by the Berkeley faculty do not. And that's what they want. It's sure as hell what I want. And that's what Palantir and all the people in this room, I hope, we're here to serve the American people. And my version of service is the soldiers are happier, the enemies are scared, and Americans go back to enjoying the fact that we're the only one with a real tech scene in this country, and we're going to win everything. That's how I see it.
That's how he sees it. And that's how Palantir is ingratiating itself, is embedding itself into the Trump administration. And this is highly, highly dangerous. Now, we showed you the clip yesterday of J.D. Vance standing behind President Trump as he explained why he had sent B-2 bombers to Iran to take out these nuclear facilities. J.D. Vance, if you read his face, I think he was saying, "Oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be president someday." Because, of course, the plan was that if Donald Trump did not run in 2028, and I think it's highly unlikely that he, even if it's constitutionally possible, and some people say it is, some people say it's not, but I really do think by that point age will be an issue, even with Donald Trump. So J.D. Vance was hoping to sort of fill his shoes, but not only as president, but as the leader of the Make America Great Again movement. And right now, the status of that movement is very much in question. But it's amazing how many people are on X. And I wonder how many of them are bots, because we've got people on X who just flipped. It's like it's like the switch flipped, and overnight they go from saying we need peace in the world, we don't want foreign wars, to whatever Donald Trump does is fine, and this is a good war, and it's going to end well, and we know it's going to end well. Now I want to find a video that I just was downloading on the fly here, and this is some very incredible stuff. And I watch Judge Napolitano just about every day because I think he's got some of the more interesting guests on. And this is a guy who really does know his constitutional law. Here we go. Here we go, folks.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Welcome to this special Sunday edition, Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, of Judging Freedom with Scott Ritter. Before Scott and I begin our conversation as to what the President of the United States ordered and the military carried out last night and this morning in Iran, a brief statement from me. What the President of the United States did was profoundly unconstitutional, absolutely unlawful, was an impeachable offense, and was a war crime. Under our Constitution, only the Congress can declare war, not the President. And Congress can only declare war on a country that poses an immediate and grave military threat to the United States of America. President Trump has started a war with Iran, which poses no threat, let alone immediate or grave whatsoever, to the national security of the United States of America. Under an unconstitutional statute, but still the law, the War Powers Resolution, the president is required to give notice to Congress and give Congress an opportunity to respond before he attacks a foreign country. He can carry out the response, but he has to tell Congress and give Congress an opportunity to respond. He not only ignored the Constitution, he ignored that law. As unconstitutional as it is, it hasn't been tested by the courts. It is still the law the president ignored it. Killing people and destroying property in another country without a just cause is a war crime. It is the moral and legal equivalent of a high crime and misdemeanor. It is an impeachable offense. And it is time for the American public and the Congress to do something about it. Now to the military aspects of all of this. Scott, what did the United States military do last night and this morning in Iran?
Well, what they did is carry out an illegal war of aggression. It's a war crime. It's not just a war crime. Judge Jackson.
I'm going to go back to that clip, but for the sake of equal time here, so I'm not just giving you one side of this. Let's listen to John Bolton, former national security advisor, and I'm sure a lot of you either think highly of John Bolton or don't think much at all. Even Donald Trump doesn't think much of John Bolton.
Well, let me say this unequivocally. I think President Trump made the right decision for America to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I think we're on the verge of potentially seeing regime change in Iran as part of that. I think this is a huge change in the Middle East. It was a decisive action. It was the right thing to do. I thought somebody should do it for a long time, but better late than never.
Why do you think it is that President Trump did this now? Obviously, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been pushing to do this for years, including when Trump was president the first time.
Right. Well, I think because of the launching of Iran's war against Israel on October the 7th in 2023, it was going to come down to this at some point anyway. This is Iran's effort to go after the little Satan, and the next target was the big Satan. So Israel really faces an existential threat from a nuclear Iran, but Iran is not just Israel's problem. Iran is the world's problem. It's particularly the U.S. problem, and we have now acted against this nuclear proliferation threat. It's clearly the right thing to do, and if Netanyahu is going in first, help persuade the president, so much the better.
So you've obviously been in these rooms. You've seen how President Trump makes decisions. We heard late this past week that it was going to be a 2-week timeline. Do you think, considering the timing of this, that 2-week timeline was just a ruse?
He said up to 2 weeks.
No, he didn't say up to 2 weeks. That is completely not true. So there would be a 2-week pause. And of course, John Bolton, the high priest of the neocons. This is the guy who thinks the United States should intervene anywhere, any day of the week to impose its will. This is a guy that Donald Trump has stated categorically in the past has been irresponsible. But suddenly, John Bolton and Donald Trump are talking from the same page.
And I thought that was a pretty clear giveaway. As I say, I would have done this a long time ago. We'll see what happens now. This is only day one, and I think how Iran responds to this, if they're foolish enough to attack American positions, American personnel in the Middle East or anywhere around the world, what happened overnight would just seem like the beginning.
So speaking of retaliation, I mean, how do you expect Iran to retaliate? What are, in your view, their list of options, and what is the most likely thing to happen next?
Well, they've got a large range of options, but the most important thing is what happens inside Iranian decision-making. So far in this war, since October the 7th, they've only had one military adversary, and that was Israel. And in fact, when Iran launched the first ballistic missile attack in human history against Israel, the Biden administration restrained Israel's response. And even the second response in October was somewhat restrained. I think if I were an Iranian general now, seeing my terrorist proxies pounded by Iran, seeing the Assad regime in Syria fall, seeing my ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs lying in ashes, I'd be saying to myself, do I really want to take on a second military adversary?
Let's go back to Scott Ritter. Yeah, I'm sure they're asking themselves that. But of course, John Bolton, with typical arrogance, suggests that you don't have a right to defend yourself against these attacks. And if you dare do so, we're going to what? Use a nuclear bomb on you? Or completely annihilate your citizenry? Let's listen to a little more Scott Ritter
from the Nuremberg trial period, lead prosecutor of the Nazi war criminals, asserted that a war of aggression is the ultimate war crime because from this war of aggression, all other crimes emanate. And this is what we did. I don't know why Americans are proud of this. This is an act of perfidy, a surprise attack, an undeclared act of aggression that had no foundation in justification. Again, to justify something like this, which is the equivalent of what we would say a preemptive a preemptive act of self-defense. So there needs to be an imminent threat that can only be dealt with through this act of aggression. Iran was in the process of negotiations that would resolve all of the issues that could be perceived as a threat. So there is no imminent threat. Moreover, we know that the sites that had been targeted, three nuclear sites, Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow, were empty, that these strikes would have zero impact on an Iranian nuclear program that had long since been evacuated from these sites and sent to other locations. It's come out that this strike plan, which was done in cooperation with Israel, was something that had been planned more than a year ago and actually been practiced by the United States and Israel. So this was a pre-planned strike against three designated sites that had no military value. So this is purely an act of theater, and any military commander that put American lives at risk to carry out an act of political theater should, literally have their commissions revoked and be drummed out of the service. There was no justification for this, but moreover, the attacks didn't even accomplish what they claimed to have accomplished. We had one B-2 bomber drop two GBU-57s on the Natanz facility.
Right. What is that? What is the GBU-57? Is that one of these 32,000-pound monsters?
Correct. They're the massive ordnance penetrator weapon that only the B-2 can carry, and it's upon the shoulders of this weapon that the United States has based its hopes of interdicting Iran's nuclear program. But Natanz had been struck at least twice and probably three times by the Israelis prior to this attack. And whatever was in Natanz, that centrifuges, etc., of value had long since been evacuated. People should understand that Natanz is the principal home of centrifuge cascades of the oldest type, the IR-1 centrifuge, which is a very inefficient centrifuge that Iran had long since replaced with these more modern centrifuges that are in Fordow. So to strike Natanz doesn't put back the Iranian program at all, and anything of value in that program had been evacuated. So we put a B-2 bomber over a target to drop two very large bombs that accomplished nothing. They literally put two additional holes in the ground of a piece of terrain that had no military, scientific, or meaningful value. It was purely a political act. The same with Isfahan. We fired 30 cruise missiles into the Isfahan nuclear complex. It appears that even the U.S. government is admitting that these missiles didn't accomplish the level of destruction that they were hoping to, that the Isfahan facility was deeper underground and more protected. So in normal circumstances, and this dates back to my time as a battle damage assessment officer during the first Gulf War, this would be immediate reattack, which means that because we initiated this, if there was legitimate military purpose to this attack, we would have to reattack to achieve those objectives. It appears, though, that Donald Trump says, no, we're done. We're willing to be done with this, which means, again, this wasn't about achieving anything meaningfully, militarily meaningful on the ground. This was an act of pure politics. And then we get to Fordow, the crown jewel of the three targets, a facility that's 90 meters or 90 feet underground, 100 feet underground. But that's street level measuring. What they're not counting are the ridges above the facility that make it even 3 or 4 times deeper than this. We struck with 6 B-2 bombers, each of which carried 2 of these massive ordnance penetrators. And the best that we could accomplish is that we did damage to 1 entrance and 1 exit of a facility that has 5 exits. We didn't do damage to the hall. We didn't penetrate But even more critical is that we know the facility was evacuated. There is satellite imagery that shows on June 18th and 19th, the Iranians had brought up trucks to remove the high-value centrifuges that were stored at Fordo, and these centrifuges have been moved to other facilities around Iran that we don't know about, together with the totality of Iran's enriched uranium. You know, that 60% uranium that everybody says can be converted into a bomb in 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
We didn't destroy that. That's all moved. So these attacks accomplished nothing in terms of retarding or limiting Iran's nuclear enrichment program. These attacks were purely an act of political theater for a president who's desperate to be seen as being a decisive leader, but all he showed was American impotence.
The Secretary of State referred to the planning of the operation as brilliant. Now, the plan must have begun in the Biden administration. Could something like this have been planned since Donald Trump became president and Pete Hegseth became Secretary of Defense?
Well, I mean, in theory, it could, but the fact is, this attack has been rehearsed by the United States and Israel during the Biden administration. Indeed, in the summer of 2023, and I believe again in 2024, there were joint exercises carried out where the United States flew B-2 bombers from Whitman Air Force Base into the theater of operations to carry out rehearsals with the Israelis. It should be pointed out that, according to the Iranian timeline, this was an attack that was not just coordinated with the Israelis, but the Israelis participated in this, meaning that the Israelis had resources and assets that were linked to this, drones and fighter aircraft that were operated over parts of Iran as in supporting operations. So this wasn't a purely American attack. This was done in concert with the Israelis.
So we'll leave it there. I'll be back in mere moments after we take a quick break here with my store with some concluding remarks. Thanks for watching today. My concluding remarks, if I've said anything on the show today to offend you, I hope you'll look at it as perhaps a means of reevaluating your position, or at least challenging your position. Well, I have to do that all the time to mine. My positions over the years have changed because sometimes the facts got in the way. And sometimes I realized I was wrong where I came from. I've always considered myself a principled conservative. I've always considered myself somebody who wants less government. I've always considered myself pro-military. But I don't think we should always be getting into foreign wars simply because there's the opportunity to do so. We have to continue to fight for freedom. We have to continue to fight for limited government. And what's going on right now with this war in Iran is not limited government. And it's certainly not necessarily leading to those broad, sunny, uplit plateau that we're being promised. Thanks for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow with more of the news you need to know. I've been broadcasting live as usual from Ottawa. Thanks for watching today. We'll